to this really quick. Hi, good morning. It's 8:52 in the morning. Today, my friends, we are going to be learning about Soundscapes. Gotta head up, we'll be back in a few. It won't be too long, but it'll be lengthy. Today, we're talking about Soundscapes. I've been waiting all morning for that. Hopefully nobody missed it. So, everybody that's in chat right now is actually kind of like seasoned producers, so you guys already kind of know what it is. But if anybody is watching this and you don't know what it is, because this will be most likely public, assuming that I don't do something stupid. We're going to be talking about soundscapes. So, a soundscape, to me, and this is an interpretation, I'm not calling it to be gospel or truth, but a soundscape to me is something that is categorized for one as a background noise, but something that serves as ambience that usually reflects some kind of space. And what I mean by that is if you were to pull up something that is kind of like a pad, I guess we can kind of talk about the differences between something like that and the sort. A pad is usually ambient in some ways and very spacious by nature, but the difference is that it's usually very tonal focused as opposed to texture focused. Ambient doom pad. See, that's funny. I would actually categorize that as a soundscape. Let's find something that is a little bit more paddish. These are good. Wow, I didn't know that these were in here. Don't let me down, Venus Theory. Okay, this is more of a pad. High five, Cam. This is something that's more categorized as a pad. It usually has something that's a lot easier to identify the tonal qualities of said sound, whereas something that is more in the realm of soundscape-ish stuff would be categorized as in kind of like abstract sounds, but maybe something's familiar to kind of place you somewhere. So something kind of like this would be more considered a noisescape or a soundscape of sorts. Now, this is really cool and stuff, and we're going to talk about how to get up to this point, but when everything is kind of playing together, we're eventually going to cover what constitutes making something kind of like this as far as a sound design technical practice goes. Yeah. So, let's talk about some different ways to kind of get some cool ambience without having to do all of this crazy stuff. And it's probably not going to be as complicated as it may or may not seem. There's also reverb on the low end. Sometimes that can be useful when you're just doing a soundscape, especially if you're working in Dolby Digital, which no DAW that I know of supports that other than that Waves plugin. But I mean, honestly, does that really do anything? So what I'm going to do is actually just kind of look into different ways to kind of create texture regardless of what kind of sample source you have. So I actually am going to reach for ROM, which is my favorite reverb plugin. And we're just going to turn it off for now. But what we can do is literally just take anything that's a sample. So we can go into your sample library and literally just type in anything. Okay, something came up. Perfect. Drum loop. Okay, so a drum loop is actually really good for this kind of stuff because it's got transients in it, and it also has other elements that are usually like, how do I say this? It has movement in it. It doesn't just have one single sound. Now, you can do this with a single sound, but it's a lot better to do something that has multiple sounds that can kind of fade in and out of each other, and that in itself is going to be pretty useful for this kind of idea, right? Oh, hell yeah, I was looking for you to do some more soundscape guides. This is awesome. Hey, Doran Court. Also, welcome, Metalhead. So if I were to play this, it looks like it's actually going to be stretched out pretty wide. So let's just take a listen and see how that sounds. Hello, I've been looking into Bitwig. Well, you've been looking in the right direction, fella. So basically what we're going to do here is I just doubled this, so now it's going to be pretty stretched out in this way. Now, if you want to get into doing like more micro editing and more, I guess shaping and stuff, then you can definitely manipulate some of the stretch modes on here, depending on what you're going for, which is totally fine. You can also try maybe something like Elastic Pro. And some other options that you can do are even like, and sorry, I'm doing all this from scratch, so just talking about different places to explore, but something else that you can think about trying is setting a resampling channel up and then actually messing with the tempo recording. So if you listen to this and I adjust the tempo, then you can actually see that regardless of whatever it is that you're doing or the way that you like to do this kind of stuff, then you can get a lot of really cool stuff just from manipulating the audio features or the warp features that are over here. It's really a shame that you can't automate this. I've been begging for that feature since I've kind of come across into Bitwig, but the new features are still pretty cool. So anything that they choose to do to improve it, it's just kind of welcome. It's not really that hard to do this by hand. So, hey Scorpio, welcome. Also, let me make sure that I'm in live chat because by nature this goes into top chat, so I want to make sure that I don't skip anybody. If at any time you guys have any questions regarding the lesson of today, then feel free to ask. I know it's a different format than doing my usual edits and stuff, but I gotta be honest with you guys, I hate editing. I am so tired of editing. It's part of the reason why I don't do a whole lot of like, if I could just stream a tutorial every day as opposed to like sit down and do like the crazy edits and stuff, then I'd be a happy camper. But we're going to just do things a little different this time, so bear with me if it's not the most best editing, sound boosted. My editing sucks anyways. Okay, so what I'm going to do here just to kind of create a simple soundscape is we're going to add some reverb to this, but before I do that, I'm going to reverse the sample. And this is one of the most common practices that we can use called the reverse reverb technique. Now, if you know me, I try not to use that word, technique, but in this case it works because this specific technique is designed to solve or to achieve a single thing. So that's where my thing is. And I guess the overall arcing thing would be that we're learning a skill, and a technique would be something that is inside of a skill. Sorry, I know, tangent. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is I am going to actually extend this like this and then join that together, because we're going to get a tail at the end of this reverb and it won't bounce out if that's not recorded. So after hitting J, we're going to get something kind of like this. Now, the reverb that I just placed on here was just 50%, so nothing crazy. You can do 100% reverb if you want to. It doesn't really matter. What we're primarily focused on right now is just creating something with movement. And so if you were to bounce this out and then reverse it, take a listen to how this sounds. One of the easiest ways to kind of get things that sound ghostly. Now, through any point of this process, you can start to do mixing aspects to it, meaning like EQing and stuff. For this demonstration, I don't really care to, just because it's not really what the video is about. But in building this and using something kind of like this that is already starting with a somewhat complex sound form, you can use a single source and kind of just add things that have modulation on top of them. So for example, I would recommend slow movement for this in particular, just because you're trying to create something that's more quote unquote atmospheric, and the more sharp or jittery or something is, the less it seems to be of that aesthetic, if that makes sense. I just had a randomizer in there. I don't know why I just did that. Anyways, what we can do is maybe slow this down to like a bar or so, and then move this to smooth, and then we can take this notch and just kind of let it float around for a bit and pull up the resonance so that way it's not cutting too much of that out. Now, aside from that, we're also going to put another instance of ROM before that and kind of double up on that whole deal. So right now, this should be playing forward. So this is, we reversed it this time, but now since we flipped it again, it's playing forward. And then when we balance this out, it's going to be reversed again. So taking a listen to this now, we can kind of just gauge how what that looks like. It sounds pretty cool. Something else that I'm going to do is I am going to pull up an effects 2. And sorry, I lied. I'm just going to use multipass because it's just a much easier thing to do. But what I'm going to grab is, I lied. I'm going to grab Snap Heap. Sorry. Sandpeep. And what this is going to achieve is a parallel signal. Wow, I was looking into ROM last night, very unique reverb. I just love the way it sounds, and it's very easy to use. So this is going to be a dry signal. We're actually just going to leave that alone. And then right here, we are going to add in a high pass. I'm also going to solo this. But what we're going to do is grab ourselves some kind of pitch manipulator. So a pitch shifter would be really good for this. And what you can do if you want to start to change this into things that have more like other kinds of texture and stuff is to actually come into this and make this do different things of this caliber. Now, what's kind of cool about this is that we're kind of setting up something that is going to start manipulating the pitch and changing and stuff. So now we can use this as an extra layer to start to introduce other means of movement. And to kind of let this be another background element, what we'll do is grab like a gain or so. We can also just use the gain right here, but I'm going to do it like this because I want to modulate it. But we can grab the gain, start from maybe -12 like this, and grab ourselves another slow evolving, maybe like 32/2, which is just 2:1, but we can start to pull that up in this way. So now whenever we play this again, we're going to hear these cool, interesting little pitches and flutters and stuff over the background that will kind of give us a little bit more complexity as far as space goes. We can even add to that too by adding some sync. So if we go into ping pong, and like maybe not too much, but just a little bit, we're starting to add to the textural quality of said sound. Hopefully you guys can hear that. But now whenever we add to that, so you can see that it's just another measure of texture and stuff that DS your mic if possible. There's nothing I can do about that right now, to be honest. Wear earplugs when you listen to me. Sorry, dude. So some other stuff that you can do as well is also change this into a reverser, because at certain points in time, by changing this into milliseconds and all that, you'll actually get some other kind of interesting qualities. And really, like, the sky is the limit with this. And so now I'm all paranoid, but you can change these in such a way that will start to like add on top of that. And you can do that both with adding textures as far as like adding sounds, or you can do things as far as adding effects in parallel. And those are the kinds of things that you kind of want to think about whenever you're starting with a single sound source. I'm going to throw a compressor on here just to make sure that it doesn't, you know, get too crazy. But you can start to see that we're getting some interesting and different movement patterns here. And something else that we can do is we can even start to play with the mix as well and automate that. Now, one cool thing about this is like the Soundscapes really cater towards randomization, because what you're trying to do is create something that's emotion, and so there's an aspect of this that's trying not to be deliberate. And this, because it's all floating in the realm of abstract, it actually caters towards you wanting to be more experimental, if that makes sense. So by doing stuff like this, there's a lot of different, you know, I guess aspects or whatever that you can achieve. And then once you have something that you're happy with, then from this point you can actually get into shaping it in a way that seems more deliberate. So like one example is you can start to add in like a custom comb filter or something. Oi, what just happened? Something like this, and just here. I think it's just the way that like my teeth anatomy are designed that my S's and plosives are very sharp, so I apologize for having a certain set of teeth. There's nothing I can do. So having something with these really crazy high peaks and resonances and stuff, which a lot of times you kind of want to not really care. Now, there is a matter of why you would want to actually be deliberate with how you create this. So one reason is if you're physical modeling, then you actually might want to create peaks and stuff that are relative towards the scale or something that you want to play. So it might make sense for you to have a resonant point that starts at C and then key track it. But for this in particular, what we can do is kind of use that same aspect of creating some kind of, you know, comb filter aspect to this, and just kind of let this play around and maybe even do something along these lines. I kind of want that to float around here. So that way you've got this aliveness of a comb filter moving around. I am going to place this before the dynamics just because I don't know if those resonant peaks are going to be like freaking nuts, but hopefully it'll give us something different and something cool. Cool. All right. So now Streamlabs does not support VST. Well, they do. I don't know if they have a de-esser though, but they don't support third-party VSTs. So yeah, now we've got ourselves something that's nice and spooky, and we can kind of bounce that out again. And let's go ahead and mute these other two things. And then what we can do is we can reverse this and solo this. The S-ing isn't too bad. That sounds pretty cool, not gonna lie. Okay, so this is one way that you can kind of get yourself to get some nice, cool things. And we used a drum loop for this that had vocals over it, and I didn't do that on purpose, but the same process will get you pretty much, it might not get you exactly the kind of texture that you want, but it will give you something that's interesting that you can use in either your tracks or some kind of, you know, whenever you're trying to set some kind of mood that's beyond just the music itself. And if you guys know my music, you know that I'm very big on creating textures, on creating things that make you feel like you're actually in a place, as opposed to trying to lead you with emotion, just because emotion is not my strong suit. So with that, what we can do now is take that a step further. And so we can grab ourselves a sampler and get into the second phase of this, which is the really fun stuff. So I'm going to go over here, and then I'm going to create a multi-sample. I'm going to come over to my bounced library of samples that I'm using, and it's this one, I believe. Nope. All right, and so what we're going to do is we're using a multi-layer sample now, and this has created a layer. Excuse me. The significance behind this is huge for Bitwig. If you have Ableton or you have another granular synth, then you can usually do like up to 4, I want to say. In typical granular synths or something like Quanta or something from Glitch Machines, they've got some really cheap granular synthesizers. At the very least, like if you're using like Ableton that only supports 1, then what you can just as easily do is group this and then duplicate this and then use a different sample, okay? So don't think that like you're kind of out of luck if that's your only option. But because we're using Bitwig, one of the coolest things about this in particular is the fact that you can have up to 128 samples being granularized at the same time. What? So that pretty much opens up the door for us to create really the most complex sounding soundscapes that would normally be very difficult to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to find some Foley samples and maybe do like 2 or 3. You can do as many as you want, but you don't really have to go overboard with it. So I'm just going to find a few. Okay, I like that one because it's not so loud. Maybe we'll try some other percussions. That one will be fine. And then I want to, just for giggles, I want to find something that's reminiscent of a clock. That one's okay. I like that one too. Let's find another one. That one's also cool. I like all of these. Okay, I like that one. This is not quite a clock, but that's okay. So between this, you can go and automate the points between these just by dragging the yellow markers from in and out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just shorten these up a bit, so that way whenever this scans from the first of the sample to the back of the sample, they're going to be randomized, so that way they're not all being played at the same time. And something that you can do to try to variate that is reversing some of these, so that way whenever the texture position will move forward, it will actually move the sample backward, if that makes sense. So even with this one, and you don't have to do the whole sample either. Like maybe there's just like one specific section that you like that you want to loop, you can do that. And you can also change the volume of these via here. Now one kind of gripe I actually have about this is the fact that you can only change or turn the gain down to -12. So that's kind of an odd thing, where actually like if you want to be more precise with it, you would duplicate the sampler and then you can just automate the volume here. But again, I like everything to be as compact as possible. So within this, we've got 5 different samples, and they're all going to play at the same time with the texture mode of the granular synth. Now, my default rack here is having a couple of randomizers on here that are going to move very slow. So this one in particular is set at a bar, which is going to move the texture position, and this one is set to change the grain size. And so now, whenever we play a single note, in theory, it's going to, well, granularize all of these at the same time. Maybe. I have to take that off. Solo. Sounds really good, right? Now we're in business. Oh, it sounded great to me. So it's cool. Sometimes I like to surprise myself with my own stuff. And I don't mean that in a means of me being a great sound designer or whatever, but part of the fun of being a sound designer is when you throw things together in unexpected ways and you enjoy the results. This could have easily gone the other way of it not being so great, and this methodology isn't foolproof, but you have a lot of you have a lot of free like leeway or a lot of room for error when you're making soundscapes like this, just because of the nature of it. And for me, I like this stuff, and it's pretty easy to do well. So that's not all. This can definitely be used. Hey, delicious crab meat. This can definitely be used on its own, right? So if you want something to be more dry and up front and you just want to use this as a textural layer, then at this point, that's when you would get into making the sound louder and then like do maybe some stereo processing. An easy thing that you can do is to just, EQ this in such a way, like listen to it. Maybe pull out the low mids, maybe boost the highs just a little bit, kind of like this. This isn't, again, gospel or whatever, so take it for what you will. But then after that, you can maybe use a limiter or a glue compressor or something to just kind of make it a little bit louder. Now, the reason why you might want to do this is maybe, you want to have the awareness of placing yourself in a space and having a relevant object or a relevance to the space that you're creating. So for example, if I am next to a machine, well, the machine is naturally going to sound louder because of the Doppler effect, right? I don't think I actually described that correctly. Sorry, let me retract. It's going to sound louder because, well, it's closer. The closer it is to your ear, then the more natural it sounds louder. Likewise, if you're in a really big room and there's a machine, but you're really far away from it, the reverb aspect of that is actually going to not have as much high frequency in it because of the Doppler effect and because of diffusion. So it's like when a car or like an ambulance comes and it's driving by, as it's coming to you, it gets louder and louder and louder. And then as it drives away from you, it actually sounds like a low pass filter is going over that. And that's the phenomenon of how that works. So when you're building soundscapes, like right now we're just using a single sound or whatever, but you can start to think about you being in a physical space and thinking about the objects or the ambience that surrounds you. And that's the coolest thing about this, because instead of thinking about how do I, make this dopest chord progression or something, I can be like, I want to tell a story, but I want this story to be very, I want the story to be very realistic in that sense. And that's why I like to do like horror sounds and stuff. Yo, thank you so much, Definite Music and Oliver Lee. I really appreciate the follow. So now that we understand that, then that's when we can go back and actually start controlling other spatial effects for this. So for example, we can just go and pull up an instance of reverb again. Again, I'm just going to stick with ROM just because I like the way that it sounds. That's badass. Sorry. Okay, so now instead of whatever it was, that machine that it sounds like we've kind of created some kind of like ghostly layer or whatever, that actually sounds like that is being pushed to the background. It actually sounds like it's surrounding more space and that it's covering more things. It's surrounding us in that sense. That's why reverb is a beautiful thing. It's also abused quite a bit. Now, there is one thing that I want to interject with before I go any further. Like with soundscapes, they're usually typically atonal, but something that you can actually do is make something that is tonal and incorporate that within your soundscapes, provided that it's relatively simple. So, delicious, that is exactly what I just said. But so if you go here, you might not be live. That might be why. You can take a single tone. I'm just going to use C because it's going to be a lot easier to use. And you can use this maybe just by like 2 bars or so. Come in here.
Recording to logbook.
And then we can bounce this out. Yo, thank you so much for subscribing, Dave. I really appreciate it. And now that we have this phase plant bounce, we can actually go back into the instrument layer, and come on over here. And then files, go to wherever that phase plant bounce is. There we go. And we can just toss that in here. And so now, because the root node is matched up to C, I did that on purpose, but if it's something different, then you just find the root node of whatever it is and then match that along. We can turn that down. But now, anytime I play a single note with this, it's actually going to have a specific tonality. Don't know if you could hear it or not, but it's definitely in there. I can hear it, but it's just kind of like that nice, easy whistling sound. And typically, like a triangle wave works better than a sine wave, just because it seems to be it's counterintuitive. The actual tonality of it is usually a little bit smoother and easier to listen to, whereas because a sine wave is a single harmonic, it's usually really sharp. So take that for what it is, and you can use any kind of pad or any other kind of bell sound or whatever if you're trying to incorporate tonality into this. But I would recommend that you kind of keep it simple in that sense. However, maybe you're trying to use all of this stuff in a way to create some kind of like floating melody or something with that. This is one easy way that you can do it. And then of course, like you can always just like layer this with another MIDI instrument or something too, right? So like I really want to talk about that or mention that, because a lot of times when we get into sound design processes, people are like, how do I copy this exactly? How do I do this exact same thing of what this person is doing? And that's not really what I am aiming to do. It's more so in a sense of, how do I give you a starting point and throw a couple ideas at you and then show you ways to explore, because I think you're going to get a lot more out of it in that way. So in essence, like the granular synth is really the epitome of like creating the coolest, dopest soundscapes. And it almost always, in certain cases, doesn't really matter what you put into it. It's just about what you do to shape it afterwards, right? Because that's not all. We've got other stuff to cover. So within the snap heap thing that I showed you earlier, I showed you how to kind of create some more textural layers and stuff, and which is pretty cool. But if you are familiar with what I do in multipass and phase plant, then you will know that I'm kind of some kind of semi-modular tycoon when it comes to creating presets that are really just shifted towards glitchy things. There's this little thing called Death Bell. Doesn't really matter, but it looks like this. I'm not going to describe how to do that. This is really just a bunch of effects that are being randomized, and that's really just the key point of it, is literally take anything and randomize it. The outcome doesn't really matter except for whether or not you like it. If you are interested in this stuff, I do have this specific sound for sale or this specific rag for sale on Eternum on my website, but that's not really why I'm here. I'm just trying to tell you that once you get into the modular aspect of things where you are mixing and matching effects to this degree, then it ends up transforming the sound in usually a pleasing way. So for example, this is what this sounds like. That's with the mix off. I'm going to play a lower pitch. And then we'll go ahead and start mixing this in. And now suddenly we've got cool stuff, right? At least I liked it. So with that, using these crazy racks and stuff, or using these crazy effects in that sense, will dramatically change the sound in certain ways. But what I also want you to be mindful of is with the ability to have things such as multipass, also including like the effects 3, which you can do most of the same stuff that I did in that with. Let me open this up. With things like this and other multipass presets, then you can end up getting some really interesting stuff to just, you know what I mean, see how it works. But that's really like the theme of this, is the power of randomization, and like really just diving deep into this and breaking the sound as much as you can go. And again, if you are getting caught up on the multipass rack or something, I have so many videos on how to build that kind of stuff, even though I'm not going to go through that specific patch. It's just, I've already got it up on the internet, so go look it up. But what you should be thinking about, assuming that your computer can handle it, is sometimes stacking these kinds of things. So instead of just having one multipass rack or one super crazy thing, you can have a combination of 2, sometimes 3, depending on, like I said before, how much your CPU can handle. And then what's also really important, wait, what just happened? What's also really important is the idea of mixing and matching. because if I place this right here, this might not sound as good as it will over here, or maybe you prefer to do that. And the other thing too is that with this, these all have a master mix on them. So why not take it a step further and go into randomizing the master mix? So we can go into a plus right here. We can go into something like this. And then we can randomize this in such a way. And maybe we don't even want it to be at full mix. Maybe we just kind of want to introduce some of these ideas here and kind of have that play along. I'm going to turn this down because this is going to change the dynamics of this quite drastically. So just bear with me, okay? But we will do the same thing where we will grab macro 1 like this, and add a randomizer to it. And then just nice and easy, maybe not even, like I said before, go into 100%, just kind of let it be in that way and let it move and then make it slower. Kind of like so. Did I do that with this one too? No, I didn't. So we'll make that one a bar. So now whenever this goes and plays in between these things, you're going to get not only this one and not only this one, but they're both going to interact with each other at the same time in certain cases. So now let's go ahead and take a listen to that. Pretty cool. Automating the size knob on Valhalla's Shimmer has a similar effect. Yeah, and that's kind of a good point too, is that like you can just as easily, instead of doing a bunch of effects, go into here and start changing things. Like I can tell you that if you start messing with the size right here, it'll actually start messing with the pitch, which is sometimes kind of fun to do. So maybe you can take like 3 or 4 instances of reverb and then automate them in between to find something else. So, you know, the fact that you're thinking outside of the box is really the whole point of this video in the first place, right? To get you to be like, oh, what am I doing? And how do I take this concept and make it my own? Because that's really what it's all about. So the other major effect that I kind of want to leave you all with is the original. Yeah, and that's kind of the point, right? Well, it can be the point. It doesn't have to be the point, but that is one thing that you can do. So then like you can start to get into like being more deliberate with how you shape things. For example, the pitch shifter is one of the dopest effects on Bitwig. I've covered this before many times. Garen has a really cool video on it and his own interpretation of it. But for me personally, this thing is freaking awesome. I'm just going to pull up a preset here, which is just a rack of randomizers that are doing both the grain size, the pitch, and the mix, as you will see. So just like this. I mean, it's only got 3 knobs. How complicated can it get, right? But whenever you listen to it, let's go ahead and actually pull the multipass off so this becomes a little bit more apparent. But take a listen to how this is going to kind of shift the sound overall. That's so badass. Right? So pitch shifters are your friend. You can even stack them in such a way. You can even use frequency shifters if you want to be a little bit more subtle and not have a granular kind of esque tearing thing. That comes from 2 things. Well, I guess it comes from all of this in general, but whenever you pull the mix down and then you mess with the grain size and the tuning of it, that's when you start to get this tearing aspect of it. And like you can literally just take this and throw it on that drum loop and get like really cool effects in that way. But for me, I've kind of been like, oh, well, I know what this does now. And now that preset kind of jumps into that same kind of thing that I like doing. But that's not all. We can also get into controlling this in certain ways and shaping this if you want to be more precise with it by using something like a ring mod, to which this will transform this entire soundscape into something that's more of something like a spaceship, because that's how ring mods work. So now take a listen to this. right? So what's happening there is you set the mix to 100% on the ring mod. This is just set to pretty much nothing. It's like oscillator, which you can set this to any other input, which is kind of cool, but right now it's just set to that. However, changing this to a really slow rate is really what's going to kind of make that sound like it's an LFO. You can also do an auto pan with this and set everything to 1. You can also do a tremolo. There's a lot of different ways to achieve this. I just choose to do it with a ring mod right now. But as this is slow, this is a consistent speed, and then whenever you slow this down and speed it up, that's when it's going to start making those like kind of transformative or like, you know, hovering machine takeoff thing. Which is super awesome. So there's that trick. Let's see, what other kind of things are really cool that I like to do? Well, really, it usually just comes down into like creating all this stuff and then kind of picking and choosing and kind of letting this just kind of play out for a bit and then seeing what I like to do best and then also mixing and matching the order of these effects. You can also automate the reverb. This is so cool. But you can see that by doing a combination of all these things, that you can get some freaking monstrous soundscapes kind of in that particular sense. So like it can really go as in depth as you want. It's just a matter of like understanding a couple of concepts that kind of like get you to the idea of atmosphere beyond like reverb. Like really the most important thing that you can take away from this is just learning how to break sound and then learning how to increase the space or control the space rather, because maybe sometimes you want things that are really close. Maybe sometimes you want things that are really far away. But you also have to realize that whenever you start making this stuff, it's always really good to have some kind of concept in mind, because the more that you kind of know what you're going for, right? Like let's say you're trying to sound design for a specific thing. Like don't be so specific that you're like, I have to make this gun sound from Halo or something, because that's not a healthy mindset to go. But maybe you're like, I'm trying to create, you know, something outside. Maybe there is, you know, some kind of plane flying over my head. Well, what does that sound like, right? Then you have that kind of type thing, and then you can start to build layers off of that, and suddenly you've got this live ecosystem of sound to where everything that's moving has this organic aspect to it. And that's why I like the randomization thing, because it makes it seem, because it doesn't repeat the same thing over and over again, it makes it seem like it's more alive. And those are the kinds of things that you really want to try to use in order to make your soundscapes more alive, right? That's kind of redundant in that sense, but it's true. Yes, it does. Well, it depends on what the effect is, but I don't know if you caught that or not, but I was saying that like it's really something to try is to mix and match these in between about how you order them, because they will sound different most of the time. But like if you put, how do I say, like if you put like a really subtle effect before or after or something, it might not make that big of a deal. But in this case, like with the multipass rack or something, like it's a huge deal. So you kind of want to be mindful of that. But that's part of the fun. And really, it shouldn't matter. Like, don't worry about trying to get the formula right. Don't worry about trying to be like, I have to get this, I have to make the right choice for this. That's actually like the farthest thing that I want to pull you from. It's more of like, here's a couple of effects, throw them together and mix and match and see what you come up with. Here's how you can also start from, you know, here's how you can start building yourself some source material, even if you don't have anything that's kind of like soundscape-esque, right? Like for me, I love to make things that are kind of ghostly in nature, things that are kind of just ghastly and really dark and really evil. And I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I grew up playing horror games and stuff. Hey, now, long time no see. But for me, like that's just the stuff that I really enjoy, and that's the stuff that I like to incorporate in my music, because it just has this, there's just nothing else like it, long story short. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this, guys. I don't really have a whole lot of other stuff to talk about regarding this. I think that I will show you this other demo that I did just beforehand. This is Dungeon Designer. And I'm going to leave this soundscape, or actually I'm going to like bounce out maybe a minute of this and leave it up to the high tier patrons. You have any plans for some comprehensive soundscape videos? Watch the stream. That's why this is here. So yeah, this is one that I made last night, which is very similar, except I'm using a bit of distortion on this. Oh, right. There was one other trick that I was talking about, which is using convolution. So this isn't a convolution reverb, but this is just convolution in general. So that's something else that you can do to try to create like real live classic spaces and stuff. But this is what this one sounds like. These just make me smile. I love these. I'm deleting my channel after the stream. Yeah, sorry, I'm not making enough money from YouTube, so I'm destroying all of my assets that I've spent years creating. So anywho, this is just Foley. Nothing crazy. You can go back and watch from the beginning now. Exactly. Fellow Scorpion. Oh, shoot. No, this will be public. This is, I was talking to people earlier and I was like, I hate edit. I love to make tutorials. I really freaking hate editing. So this is a little bit more organic. I do have the ums involved. My voice has no de-esser on it, but at the same time, it's just, I enjoy doing it this way so much more than I do sitting down and trying to render something from Final Cut. So bear with me. You should be sound designing for movies and games. I want to someday. I don't know how to get into that industry. So I'm just going to keep refining my craft and then maybe revisit it at some point when I have a little bit more information on the subject. But yeah, does anybody have any questions regarding soundscapes and stuff? Because I pretty much went through just about everything you need to know in order to create like something from nothing and then going into like the dense complexity of like combining all of the sound design tricks that I know. Did you try ROM's Cosmic Algo for tearing of sounds? It's worth a shot if you already did. Sorry for spamming. There's no spam, but yeah, I have used Cosmic in some cases or another, but I think that I've used Cosmic more for like bass stuff. But yeah, it's definitely an option. And something else that you can do too is like if you've got like Pro R, then something that Frequent taught me a long time ago, which was really cool, was that you can use the Reverb EQ to kind of like force resonances. So because there's this algorithm or something, you can actually start to like change and make your own custom resonances in that way. And so like you can, holy cow, I didn't realize this, but you can actually like do like physical modeling comb filters that are actually just reverb in that sense. That's actually something I got to mess with more. So Alvin, thank you for that idea. But imagine, you know what I mean, having a bunch of points like this that, you know, you're pretty much, oh, you can only have up to a certain amount. Well, you can also do the pre as well. So maybe there might be that, but that's pretty sick that you can make that. Ambisonic Reverb, is that smart reverb? I'm not sure. Maybe. I feel like so many plugin names have been thrown my way that I might have like taken a look at it and then like dismissed it or something, but would love to see your take on it. No, it's not a smart reverb. I'll take a look at it at some point, okay? But I guess as of now, I don't recall it. But yeah, I guess like you can at least just use a handful of effects on this or whatever, or a handful of nodes. I think this is the amount that you can, yeah, that's it. But at the same time, it's still enough to create something. So that could be kind of cool to like really make that super dramatic in that way and then see what you get. And then maybe like place this earlier in the chain, maybe like right here, and mess with the mix. That's cool. Does Pro R have internal mod capabilities? No, but you can use Bitwig's modulators or Ableton's modulators to mess with the frequency cutoff. So if you look right here, you can see that the frequencies are this way. So it might be cool to, you know, use a randomizer or something like that to kind of just sweep those frequencies at a really slow rate. Something kind of like that. But yeah, and then maybe like super slow. Oh, super slow like that. So yeah, there's a lot of different options that you can do to kind of make this more and more interesting. But like the key to it is kind of like what I was talking about when I did pads a long time ago, is you're really just starting with something relatively simple usually, and you're just kind of compiling effects on it more and more. And the more randomization or the more modulation that you can add, obviously the more complex the sound becomes. But at its very core, you have the option of like, you can just use literally reverb and one specific sample or something and stretch that out, right? Or you can take that and start to build and go as complex as you want, and even start to have multiple tracks with multiple MIDI and multiple things in order to create this whole ensemble of different kinds of atmospheric sounds and stuff. But for me, I'm pretty satisfied with just using a single sampler and then kind of like stacking other effects on top of that, because they're all going through the same processing. So it kind of makes it seem like they all fit together, if that makes sense. So, you know, it's really up to you with what you want to do. Okay, Bailey, thanks for coming in, man. Good to see you. Definitely going to mess with some soundscapes later. Awesome. Well, yeah, guys, does anybody have any questions or anything that you want to know about soundscapes? This is pretty much what I do every time I want to make something that's like quote unquote atmospheric. Usually what I do is I make a generator and then I just take a piece of it and create a soundscape out of it. But yeah, I wanted to like demystify how a lot of that stuff is done. All right, cool. Well, much love to you all. Thank you so much for thoughts on doing a preset pack. I have preset packs up. They are on my website. If I'm going to do a preset pack, it's going to be for Faceplant, because I'm not going to make like a multi-effect rack that people are going to have every single plugin to make work, if that makes sense. So I can do most of this stuff in Faceplant, so I might do some kind of soundscape thing like that in that sense. But a lot of like, honestly, like the stuff that I have for MPE already cover a lot of ground with soundscapes and all that. So if you, I have a preset pack for sale called Eternum, but if you look up the MPE patches and the generator patches, these start off as a simple sound, so like a simple bass. And then they have neural processing to them. And then they also have another knob that changes it into a generator. So you can pretty much just like take any of this stuff and maybe slow it down and stretch that out and then start to build your stuff from there. But it's nothing that's like specifically catered towards like making actual soundscapes and stuff. Faceplant is introducing granular soon. Yeah, no, they talked about like it's on their radar, but they've got a lot of other stuff planned for it. I'm kind of under NDA to talk about it. But it's a ways away, but they do have it in mind. They are thinking about ways that they can do it. Not that I'm like super affiliated with them or anything, but yeah, it's on their list to do. I just don't know when it's coming, is what I meant to say. So yeah, you know, with all this stuff, Faceplant, you can pretty much do anything. And that's why I tend to fanboy over it so much, but it's true. It really is a super synth, and you can do the only thing that it can't actually do that's like real is additive and granular synthesis, but even then it has granular effects that can get you a lot of the similar results. Hey Carbon, good morning. You just pretty much caught the end of the lesson, but yeah, we did some good stuff. if you guys have any other questions about this kind of sound design and all that, just hit me up in the Discord. Feel free to share your stuff and free stuff if you like come up with a cool soundscape or something and you want to share it with everybody else. But other than that, this is pretty much all I know about how to make cool atmospheric sounds from random sources. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Much love. I guess I will see you later. I might do some gaming later. I might just chill. I don't know, but I definitely wanted to put up some informative content. Bye. Bye, boo.